I never thought my life would take such an unexpected turn in my 50s. 4 years, I lived a simple and predictable life. My husband, David, and I had been married for over 30 years. We raised our children, built a home, and grew older together. But somewhere along the way, the spark faded. David was a good man, kind, responsible, and dependable. He had never raised his voice at me, never mistreated me, and always provided for our family. But somewhere along the way, the love that once burned brightly between us had dimmed to a faint, flickering light. Our marriage had become predictable, drained of passion and excitement. It was as if we had become two distant planets, orbiting the same space but never truly touching. Every day felt like a replay of the one before. He would come home from work, sigh heavily as he dropped his briefcase by the door, and loosen his tie without so much as a glance in my direction. He would head straight to the living room, sink into his usual spot on the couch, and turn on the television. The sound of the news anchor's voice filled the room, but between us, there was only silence. At dinner, we would sit across from each other, eating in quiet monotony. I would ask about his day, and he would give the same tired response, "It was fine." If I pressed for more, he would nod, grunt, or give short, clipped answers, as if conversation had become a chore. Eventually, I stopped asking. When night fell, he would go to bed before me, barely acknowledging my presence. I would slip under the covers, hoping, just hoping, that maybe this time he would reach for me. Maybe this time, he would hold me the way he used to when we were younger. But every night was the same. He would turn his back to me, exhale deeply, and within minutes, he was asleep. No goodnight kiss. No lingering touch. No whispered words in the dark. I felt invisible. Unnoticed. Like a ghost in my own home. At first, I convinced myself that this was normal. That love, after so many years, was not about fire and passion but about companionship. That marriages were meant to settle into quiet routines, into habits of comfort rather than longing. I told myself that this was how it was for everyone, that fairy tales were for the young, and real love was about endurance, not excitement. But deep inside, a longing grew, a restlessness I couldn't shake. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be touched. I wanted to feel the rush of excitement again, the thrill of anticipation, the warmth of desire. I wanted to feel alive, not just existing from one day to the next. And that was when everything began to change. One evening, as I sat alone in bed, the dim glow of my phone screen casting soft shadows on the walls, I found myself lost in thought. The silence of the house was suffocating. David had fallen asleep hours ago, as he always did, without a word or a touch. I stared at the ceiling, my mind restless, my heart heavy with a longing I couldn't quite put into words. I unlocked my phone and began scrolling aimlessly, searching for anything, to distract me from the emptiness. That was when I stumbled upon an article about women who had found excitement in online chats. The words on the screen seemed to call out to me, whispering a forbidden promise of adventure. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the search bar. What harm could it do? I reasoned. It was just curiosity. Just a little fun to break the monotony. Before I could second-guess myself, I created a profile on a discreet website. I chose a fake name, one that made me feel mysterious, someone different from the ordinary woman I had become. My heart pounded as I uploaded a simple picture, not revealing, just enough to pique a curiosity. Within minutes, my inbox lit up with messages. Some were crude, filled with bold propositions that made me recoil. Others were charming, playful, but shallow. I skimmed through them, feeling a mix of excitement and guilt, until one message stood out. "Hi there. You seem interesting. I'd love to talk, no pressure, just a conversation." His name was Chris. Unlike the others, his words weren't laced with desperation or lust. He was 55, divorced, and, as he put it, familiar with loneliness. His message felt different, like an invitation to something deeper than just flirtation. I hesitated before responding, my fingers tapping against the screen. But before I knew it, we were talking, really talking. We spoke about life, about love, about the quiet ache of feeling unseen. He asked about my interests, my dreams, the things that made me happy. For the first time in years, I felt heard. Someone was actually listening, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. Hours passed like minutes. His words pulled me in, making me laugh, making me think, making me remember what it was like to be excited by a conversation. I told myself it was harmless. Just talking. Just a way to fill the empty spaces of my life. But deep inside, a thrill curled in my stomach, a warning and a temptation all at once. I knew I was playing with fire, and I wasn't sure I wanted to stop. Days turned into weeks, and my conversations with Chris became more than just an escape, they became my lifeline. Every morning, I woke up with excitement, my first thought not of David, but of Chris. Throughout the day, I would glance at my phone, my heart skipping a beat whenever his name appeared on the screen. His words were a source of comfort, a reminder that I was still a woman who could laugh, who could flirt, who could feel. We spoke about everything, our pasts, our regrets, our unspoken desires. With him, I could be honest. I could tell him things I had long buried, things I couldn't even admit to myself. He made me feel seen, understood, wanted. It was intoxicating. One night, as we chatted, he sent a message that made my breath hitch. "What if we met in person?" I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. I knew the answer should be no. I knew that crossing this line would change everything. But deep inside, a dangerous thrill coursed through me. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I typed back, hesitating. "No pressure," he replied. "But I'd love to see you. Just to talk. Nothing more unless you want it to be." I knew it was wrong, but I also knew I had already made my decision long before he asked. "Okay." We planned to meet at a quiet cafe in the next town over, far enough that no one would recognize me. The day of the meeting, I spent longer than usual getting ready. I put on my best dress, one that hugged my figure just right. I fixed my hair, applied a soft shade of lipstick, and for the first time in years, I looked at myself in the mirror and felt beautiful. When I arrived at the cafe, my heart pounded so loudly I thought everyone around me could hear it. Then, I saw him. Chris was already waiting at a corner table, a confident yet gentle presence. He was tall, well-dressed, with salt and pepper hair that only made him look more distinguished. But it was his eyes that captivated me, warm, inviting, filled with an understanding that made me feel safe yet excited all at once. The moment he smiled, the nerves melted away. We talked for hours, losing ourselves in conversation as if we had known each other for years. We laughed, we teased, we shared stories that felt too personal for two people who had just met in person for the first time. But that was the magic of it, we weren't strangers at all. As the evening drew to a close, Chris reached across the table and lightly brushed his fingers over mine. It was such a simple touch, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. "I don't want this to end," he said softly. Neither did I. He didn't pressure me, didn't rush me. There was no urgency in his words, no expectation in his actions. He simply let me take the lead. But before I had a chance to fully process the gravity of the situation, I learned that he had already taken the next step. He'd booked a hotel. And when he told me, it was not with excitement or triumph, but with a quiet calm, as if he wanted me to make the decision myself, to feel that it was my choice. In that moment, I should have walked away. I should have turned around and gone straight back to my life, back to David. I knew what was right. I knew the risks, the consequences of what I was about to do. And yet, something in me hesitated, not because I didn't understand the potential fallout, but because, for the first time in years, I felt like I had a choice. A choice that wasn't about being a wife, a mother, or an obligation. It was about me. It was about my desires, my longing for something more than the empty routine I had become so accustomed to. But when I stepped into that warm, dimly lit room, everything shifted. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the weight of reality hit me, but it felt different, electric, almost. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, with a rawness I hadn't allowed myself to feel in ages. I could sense it all around me, the longing, the desire that had been buried deep within, smothered by the years of emotional neglect. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, mental, a hunger for something real, something alive. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, as the world outside seemed to fade away. The soft glow of the lamps cast shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and foreign. It was as if time had slowed, allowing me to take in every detail, the way his eyes watched me, the way my breath quickened, the way I realized I had been craving this connection for so long. It wasn't just about the physical act that could happen here. No, it was more than that. It was about rediscovering a part of myself that had been lost. The part that was no longer just defined by my role as a wife or a mother. The part that still wanted to be seen, to be desired, to be made to feel like more than just an accessory in someone else's life. I should have turned around. I should have walked away. But in that moment, all of my reasons for hesitation seemed to fade into the background, drowned out by the thudding of my own heart. I was standing on the edge of something unknown, and I felt more alive in that instant than I had in years. For the first time in years, I felt wanted. It was a feeling I had long forgotten, buried under the weight of responsibilities and years of emotional distance. To be desired, to be seen not as a wife or a mother, but as a woman, was something I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. Every glance, every word, every touch from him told me that I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just someone who cooked the meals, did the laundry, and took care of everything. I was someone. I was worthy of attention, of affection, of desire. I felt beautiful. It wasn't about the way I looked in the mirror, or the clothes I wore, or the reflection of age and time that had settled on my skin. No, it was something deeper. It was the way he looked at me, as though I was the only thing that mattered in that moment. His gaze made me feel as though every part of me, every curve, every flaw, was perfect. He didn't just see me, he appreciated me in a way that David hadn't for years. I felt beautiful not because of what I had become, but because in that space, I was allowed to remember who I had once been, who I still was, deep down. I felt alive. It wasn't just the warmth of the room or the closeness between us, it was the energy in the air, the sense of possibility. The world outside seemed so far away in that moment. The struggles, the routines, the frustrations that had dominated my life felt distant and irrelevant. I was no longer just existing in a stale, predictable cycle. I was living. My heart raced, my body responded, and for the first time in so long, I felt in control of my own desires. In that room, I was reminded of the woman I had once been: bold, passionate, and unapologetically alive. And for a fleeting moment, everything felt right. Everything felt real. When morning came, I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling as the first rays of sunlight crept through the curtains. My body was still warm from the night before, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I felt guilty, but also exhilarated. I had done something I never imagined myself doing, something society would condemn me for. And yet, as I turned my head and saw Chris sleeping peacefully beside me, I didn't feel regret. For the first time in years, I had felt alive, cherished, desired. It was a feeling I wasn't ready to let go of. But reality was waiting. Slipping out of bed, I dressed quietly, trying not to wake Chris. He stirred slightly, reaching for me in his half-sleep, but I gently pulled away. My heart ached as I whispered, "I have to go." He didn't try to stop me. He understood. The drive home felt surreal. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my pulse still racing from the night before. As I pulled into the driveway, a deep sense of unease settled over me. What had I done? How was I supposed to act normal after this? Walking into the house, I saw David sitting at the kitchen table, sipping his morning coffee. He barely looked up as I entered. "Morning," he muttered, flipping through the newspaper. I stood there for a moment, watching him. The man I had once loved with every part of me. The man who had slowly stopped seeing me, stopped wanting me. A pang of guilt twisted in my chest, but alongside it, another feeling bubbled up: resentment. How had we ended up like this? How had he let our marriage become so lifeless, so devoid of passion? Was it entirely my fault? Or had he stopped trying long before I did? I sat down across from him, searching his face for any sign that he sensed a change in me. But he didn't. He didn't ask where I had been. He didn't notice the subtle glow on my skin, the way my lips were slightly swollen from Chris's kisses. Maybe he had stopped noticing me a long time ago. Chris and I continued seeing each other in secret. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually, I would have to end it. But every time I was with him, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: joy, passion, excitement. He reminded me that I was more than just a wife, more than just a mother. I was a woman. With time, I became better at hiding my secret. I perfected the art of slipping away unnoticed, of crafting excuses that David never questioned. I found myself smiling more, laughing more. My energy returned, my spirit rekindled. And the most painful part: David didn't even notice. Maybe he was too comfortable. Or maybe, deep down, he just didn't care anymore. One evening, as I sat at the dinner table with David, pushing my food around my plate, he looked up from his meal and studied me for a moment. His gaze was different, curious, almost cautious. "You seem different lately," he said. My heart pounded. A cold wave of panic rushed through me. Did he know? Had he noticed the way I lingered in front of the mirror a little longer, the way I checked my phone more often, or how I left the house with a new kind of energy? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Stay calm," I told myself. Before I could respond, he continued, "Happier, I guess. Happier. Not suspicious. Not unfaithful. Just happier." I let out a quiet breath, forcing a small smile. "I've just been taking better care of myself," I said, my voice steady. It wasn't a complete lie. I had started dressing better, wearing perfume again, even putting more effort into my hair and makeup. But the reason behind it? That was something he would never know. David nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer, and returned to his meal. The conversation ended as quickly as it had started, but his words lingered in my mind. That night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, a heavy realization settled over me. I didn't want to live a double life forever. The secrecy, the sneaking around, it thrilled me, yes, but it also exhausted me. The constant fear of being caught, the guilt that crept in when I least expected it. I knew it couldn't last forever. But at the same time, I didn't want to go back to the way things were. I couldn't imagine returning to the dull, lifeless routine of my marriage. I had tasted something new: freedom, passion, excitement, and I wasn't ready to let it go. I had a choice to make. Stay in my safe but empty marriage, or risk everything for the chance to truly feel alive. I thought about telling David everything. Maybe it would wake him up. Maybe it would make him realize that I needed more from him. But deep inside, I knew the truth. My marriage had died long ago. Chris had shown me that I was still capable of passion, of happiness. But I didn't want to build my life on secrets. So, I made my decision. I stood in the middle of the bedroom, my suitcase half-packed, my hands trembling slightly as I folded the last of my clothes. The air was thick with unspoken words, yet the house remained silent. David sat in the living room, flipping through channels, oblivious, or maybe just indifferent, to the fact that I was about to walk out of our life together. I took a deep breath and stepped into the doorway. "I need some time away," I said, my voice calm but firm. David didn't look up right away. When he finally did, there was no shock, no protest, just a slow nod. "All right," he said simply. That was it. No questions. No fight. No desperate attempt to make me stay. That was the final sign. I had already left this marriage emotionally, and now, I was finally leaving physically. I walked out of the house, my suitcase rolling behind me, and with every step, I felt lighter. The guilt, the fear, the hesitation, it all faded with the distance. For the first time in years, I was choosing me. Chris and I didn't rush into anything serious. There were no grand promises, no fairy tale endings. We took things slow, savoring each moment. But for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't know what the future held. Would Chris and I last? Would I regret my choices? I had no answers. But I knew one thing. I was finally living. Life has a way of taking us down paths we never expected. We make plans, we set goals, and we work hard, but somehow, the twists and turns of life often lead us somewhere entirely different. Over time, we get caught up in routines, endless cycles of work, responsibilities, and obligations, and before we know it, we forget what it feels like to simply be happy. I had spent so many years trying to make sense of my marriage, trying to hold it together, trying to convince myself that love was supposed to be a calm, steady thing. But the truth was, I had become numb. I had forgotten how to laugh freely, how to love with excitement, how to be the woman I once was. I had stopped living for myself, and in doing so, I had lost sight of what truly mattered. My journey had been filled with unexpected turns. Mistakes, regrets, and moments of doubt weighed heavily on me. There were times I wondered if I had made the right choices, times I thought about what might have happened if I had stayed in my marriage and tried harder. Could I have fixed it? Could I have spoken up sooner, demanded more from David before it was too late? There were so many unanswered questions that lingered in my mind. But as I stood at the crossroads of my life, I realized something profound, something that made everything, even the painful moments, feel worthwhile. In the end, we all deserve to feel alive. Not just exist, not just go through the motions, but truly feel alive in our hearts, our bodies, and our souls. We deserve to feel passion, joy, and connection. We deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be loved in the way we long for. And for the first time in so long, I felt that again. In my 50s, I rediscovered the vibrant, passionate woman who had been buried under years of routine and complacency. I realized that it wasn't too late to find happiness, to reclaim my sense of self, to experience the thrill of truly living. I may have made mistakes along the way, but those mistakes led me here, to a place where I could finally breathe, where I could look in the mirror and smile, knowing that I was no longer just existing, but living. And that, in the end, was worth everything.